A war of words and the hijacking of language to promote leftist narratives.
Gun violence.
Gun violence. Epidemic of gun violence throughout the country.
A closer look at how common phrases are being used as propaganda and how a new campaign is fighting back against words and phrases that are misleading America. Next. We often hear phrases like climate change, gun violence, and gender affirming care on repeat in the media. And it doesn't happen by accident. Dan Curry is my guest, and he's working to bring you the truth behind the words and phrases we strangely hear all the time. Dan, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
So let's start there. Is there really a war over words going on?
Yeah, there's a war on words. There's a language warfare is going on in this country, and some conservatives don't know this war is going on. They're stealing our language in broad daylight. We kind of noticed that. I'm an ex-journalist, and I've been in politics and government for years, and started noticing it 5-10 years ago when all the discussion in our country, the debate we have on TV with TV ads, political ads, and so forth, the left is using narratives that they've crafted, and they've used propaganda terms to frame the issues. And these propaganda terms are completely loaded, and so they're tilting the battleground. And we noticed that at Restoration of America. We said, how can we fight back against this distortion and this tilting of the battlefield it's like a baseball game, and we're starting the game with the bases loaded against us and before first pitch is even thrown. So we decided we need to start telling people that these narratives that are being used are loaded. And I think a lot of people, the people on the left know what they're doing. They know they're purposely putting propaganda phrases out there, but a lot of people in the middle that are using these phrases because they're echoed by the culture and they're echoed by the media, and they just become part of our daily conversation. And I think a lot of them, people don't even really realize that these phrases are loaded.
So I know you're then working on this project called Language Watch with the nonprofit organization Restoration of America. These are 1-minute videos about key phrases and words. Talk first about why is this so important?
Well, I think what we're trying to do, we're not trying to debate the issue in these 1-minute videos. What we're trying to do is point out to the public that the phrase itself is loaded. And so that's a very specific thing we have in mind, an objective, a mission we have in mind with these videos. We're trying to alert people that a phrase that they may be using is not fair. It's not a neutral way to frame something. It's a politically loaded and charged phrase. And so we believe that a lot of people don't even realize that. So that's what we're trying to do.
You started with gun violence. It's something we hear from Democratic leaders here in Minnesota quite often.
Gun violence, like the phrase assault weapons, is a made-up term. It's political. It diverts our attention from why the crime was committed to an inanimate object.
Just recently, a Minneapolis police officer was shot and killed. Hours later, our governor was quick to blame his tragic death on gun violence and not the actual suspect. So then we have the Mockingbird media, of course, not asking any questions in all of this. But what's the real story behind the phrase gun violence, and why does it matter?
Yeah, so it's a very sad situation. As someone who spent their whole career in the Chicago area, I've watched this thing play out time and time and time again. Someone is tragically killed in the inner city of Chicago, and political leaders come out, do a press conference, and they immediately, instead of getting at the underlying causes, the destruction of the family, all these other causes that are really causing the problem, they attack the gun violence. It's a phrase they use, and therefore they don't have to answer those questions about these cultural problems that have caused this to happen. They just demonize the gun, and therefore it's a deflection, is what it is. They probably deep down know that it's not really the real root of the problem, but they're trying to avoid discussing the root of the problem. So it's this endless cycle, and then the violence continues and continues and continues and never ends.
The phrase climate change also seems quite telling here. The video from Language Watch explains how climate change became a popular catchphrase because the push to control our economy needed a rebranding. But why are so many people then adopting these words without taking a closer look at the bigger picture here, Dan?
Yeah, so climate change is a really interesting one. If you go back and follow history and follow how we use language around climate, it used to be called global cooling originally. There was all these in the 70s, where, the coming ice age. There were all kinds of articles that are appearing in Time magazine, Newsweek magazine. And then suddenly it became global warming. And Al Gore popularized that. And the planet was warming. It's out of control. And then there was a period of time for about 15 years where the global satellite temperatures flatlined. And so therefore it wasn't warming anymore. So that was inconvenient to those trying to spread this. So they started using the phrase climate change, which when you really dissect the phrase, it means nothing. Climate change. The climate always changes. So it's a catch-all phrase that allows them to put everything under that umbrella. So if you say climate change, if it's getting colder, that's climate change. If it's getting warmer, that's climate change. If there's more hurricanes, that's climate change. If there's less hurricanes, that's climate change. So they blame everything on climate change. And it's a kind of it's just a nonsensical phrase, really. And we're nonsensically using it, parroting it, and we should stop using it. Climate change is really a silly, stupid phrase that we should not use.
Another term that seems to be used like a political weapon here in Minnesota is gender affirming care. You've called it a monstrous distortion of language. So why are politicians, though, in the corporate media so quick to use it? Again, no questions asked.
Well, Liz, you were in the media, and you still are in the media, but you know exactly what happens is that once the left puts out a narrative and sends a signal that this is the phrase we're going to start using, as you called it, the mockingbird media, they just repeat the phrase. And really the media is a key component in this because, as you know, and I was an ex-journalist for years, the media used to be a check on this kind of thing. They used to have a thing called, and they still have it, called the AP Style Book, which governed the use of phrases. And we were constantly told that we couldn't use loaded phrases because they are unfair. They're favoring one political side over the other. And I can remember when I was a reporter, and I used a phrase once that was just slightly loaded, and I didn't even realize it. My editor called me and said, "You can't use that phrase, it's loaded." But that doesn't happen anymore. That was years ago when the media was relatively fair. Now, if you go and look at the AP Style Book in the last 5 years or so, they've completely surrendered to the left. And if you go in there, gender affirming care is in there, and all these climate change and all these twisted words that are loaded toward leftists are in there and are being encouraged to be used by the media. And so the media no longer is an effective check on this hijacking of the language. They are enablers of this and partners in this hijacking.
Another insightful video from Language Watch explains how the phrase election denier was basically made up to shut you up. If so, sure seems to be working. What's the use of this phrase, though, really all about?
Well, it's another insidious phrase. Of course, it evokes Holocaust denier, which is, you know, really a despicable belief out there, a fringe belief. So they're trying to attach that fringe belief and use the term denier to election denier and a bunch of other issues. So it's a very despicable way to attach something very fringe to something, denying and then the whole phrase itself is kind of nonsensical. Again, nobody is denying there was an election. People are just questioning questionable results. And that's the American way, that we are able to hold our government accountable. Our government runs elections. And so, and we pay, our taxpayer dollars pay for the administration of elections. And it's in the best spirit of America that we hold our leaders and our government accountable. So asking questions about the election is very American, and it's far from anything bad. In fact, it's something good.
But then, in fact, you're painted in a bad light as a result of just the language that's being used. If there is then a war on words, what are some of the ways that all of us can fight back?
We are putting our videos out there as to, first of all, serve as kind of a reference. We're putting these out every 2 weeks, and over time there will be, dozens and dozens and dozens of these phrases that are in common use that people can refer to. And so that's one way to do it. But we're trying to instruct people on our side why these are loaded. And so therefore, when they're doing interviews, when they're in conversations with people like election denier, they should go, they should say to the person who brings up that phrase, they said, that's a really low thing for you to do, to call me an election denier. That evokes Holocaust denialism. And why would you do that? Why don't you debate the issue? Why are you using these loaded phrases to try to paint a distorted picture? Why are you using propaganda? So we have to push back on all these phrases. Gender affirming care, of course, is trying to make something that's really kind of monstrous sound just soft and nice. Affirming care is not care, it's not affirming. And gender is not some multi-point thing. It's it's male or female, and everybody knows it. And so why are they trying to twist these practices that are going on into something that sounds good? They're doing it for a reason, because they know that the American public does not approve of most of the elements of gender affirming care. So they have to put a different label on it to avoid the actual debate. All of these terms are a way for the left to avoid debating these issues in a neutral way, because if you go into polls on almost all of these phrases, the underlying issues behind them, the American public is on the side of conservatives. These are issues that we're in the majority on, but they're making it try to sound like we're in the minority.
I know Language Watch and Restoration of America will also be exposing other phrases soon, such as systemic racism and your truth. So we're going to be sure to keep an eye out for those insights. But want to thank you, Dan Curry, for joining me.
It's been a pleasure, and keep up the good work. The documentary on the George Floyd case was excellent, and everybody should see it. And we've spread it around as much as we can on social media, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Language certainly played a role in all of that, and still does, frankly, 4 years later. But for more about the Language Watch videos, head to restorationofamerica.com. That'll do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We'll see you next time.